Hello and welcome to Comms Life by APCO Worldwide. I'm your host, Tom Billinghurst. Every week we take a deep dive into the topics and trends shaping the communications industry and beyond. A job isn't always for life, but a job right now in the era of COVID-19 makes life a lot more bearable. The pandemic has not discriminated when it's come to industries. The virus has afflicted all in its wake, and as a result, unemployment rates across the world are reaching record highs. Salaries have been slashed across the board, and demands on working hours have increased tenfold. The job market has shifted, perhaps irreversibly. The future of work is here. So, what jobs are emerging and which are fading in the wake of COVID-19? What skills do we need to fill them, and how do we find them? And how can individuals, from job seekers to CEOs, position themselves as industry leaders in this hyper-competitive market? Joining us to discuss these questions and more are Najat Abdelhadi, Communications Lead at LinkedIn MENA, and Lynn Chouman, News Editor at LinkedIn. Najat, Lynn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom. Wonderful being here.
Thank you, Tom, for having us.
So there's only one place to start this conversation. Najat, I'll come to you first, perhaps. The impact of COVID-19 on the massive professional network that you oversee every day. We mentioned that unemployment rates across the world are sky high, but what's the scene like in the Middle East and North Africa right now?
Yes, so according to LinkedIn data, the worst slump in hiring has already occurred. We are on the way to recovery. What we look at is LinkedIn hiring rate, and in the UAE, it's showing that the daily trend is down 48% versus this time in 2019, recovering from the lowest point of 62% at the end of April. But just to give context, so people know that we're not only talking about the UAE, the same figure is currently hovering around 44% in the UK, so that's minus 44%, and minus 45% for Italy. So what we're seeing here is actually on par with the global trends, as it looks like in most markets, the worst is behind us. However, the way we describe this is we say that we are cautiously optimistic. We are seeing hints of recovery, but we still caution that we still have a long way ahead.
Cautiously optimistic. Industries have been affected, but which ones in particular have been the worst hit by COVID-19?
What we're really talking about here is that what we mean by being worst hit is that their hiring rates year on year are now well below the national average. The number one suspect is retail. There has been a massive drop in retail by 63%, with a decline intensifying obviously significantly around COVID and the lockdown that we saw in the UAE. Next on the list is recreation and travel. This is mainly driven by aviation and the tourism sectors. Next is media and communications, unfortunately, down by 30%. Yeah, this is mainly driven by marketing and advertising subsectors. It is worth noting that both media and communications and the recreation industry job postings, they were on an upward trajectory before COVID, and this was completely shattered after the lockdown. And in fourth place is construction, which actually was already seeing flat trends in the last few years, so it's not a surprise.
Give us some hope. What jobs have you seen on the rise in the wake of this disruption?
Before COVID, a lot of organizations were already thinking about digital transformation, strategy, new ways of doing business. When COVID came, they saw that they have to do it really quickly because people were working remotely and they needed to liaise between the teams more effectively. So that's why we saw more software positions being opened up in organizations that might be laying off people nonetheless, but they're just hiring in different domains. Healthcare, obviously, this is not a surprise. It was central to the pandemic response, and corporate services, again, to support corporations navigate the new reality.
So Najat, we've seen new job postings in new sectors emerge, digital transformation been at the heart of them, as you say. But I wonder, we hear a lot about this skills gap. So are people ready to take on these jobs, or is there going to be an element of learning on the job upskilling once you get them? Where are we between what we're capable of and what's required going forwards?
Now you have to keep your skills updated. And this has been the mentality in the last, I would say, 5-10 years. So people are more aware. Of course, COVID changed this reality a little bit in terms of what skills are required. Let me just open by saying that hard skills will never be irrelevant. I know that soft skills are trendy to talk about now, they're needed, but hard skills, the skills that you utilize in your job day in, day out, you will always need these, and you will always need to highlight these on your resume or your LinkedIn profile, because when people are looking to recruit, they're going to look for that. However, soft skills are also essential because as we move towards automation and AI, people's skills really come in under the spotlight. So what will set you apart is your human skills that no machine is going to be able to imitate. So for example, adaptability, we saw how important this is, especially under COVID. The pandemic introduced new work schedules, workspaces, technologies, etc. Also, surprisingly, this comes into the mix, and we see this term a lot in our data, which is customer service. The pandemic crisis impacted the way companies do business. And many services are now completed online. People just go in and complete the service or buy something rather than doing it in person. So strong customer service skills are vital. And in fact, our UAE data shows that customer service roles are among the top jobs now. We call them the hottest jobs, but basically it means that we are seeing massive amounts of job postings within that domain.
Really interesting. So say you are a candidate for any given job that's being posted on LinkedIn. You have what's required. We know because of the impact on job losses, the field is going to be hyper competitive. So going back to perhaps what LinkedIn was originally intended for, and finding and sourcing people to fill jobs, how do you get noticed? How do you pimp your CV so that job recruiters are going to come to you and say, I think you're the person for the role?
Your photo is essential. This is the first thing that a recruiter is going to see when they're looking for candidates. And the way we describe it is, if you're going to a conference next week, would you like your LinkedIn photo to be taken and sized up on a big poster at the door? Do you want to be wearing sunglasses, for example, in this photo? You should be looking like work appropriate. So in clothes that you would go to work, for example. Also the headline, which is the thing that appears just below your photo on LinkedIn, is very important. And this is customizable. So for example, it doesn't have to say, Najat Abdelhadi, communications manager at LinkedIn. I can edit that and say a marketing and communications leader in the Middle East, for example. And this is, again, very important because my photo and headline appear next to all my posts on the newsfeed. Share content. Be always there on people's radar on LinkedIn. Don't just log in when you're looking for a job. Establish your presence and you will reap long-term benefits.
People, recruiters, companies, and even peers need to know who you are, what your professional hats are, right? And this is something that needs to be updated on a very regular basis with information about what kind of skills, of course, you have, which is the CV part, but also, and very importantly, what kind of interests and what kind of mindsets, professional mindsets do you have? This is where content sharing comes, and it's very important, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it later, but say what you have to say about your industry. Show what kind of expert you are, what your interests are, even your hobbies, even your thought leadership, ideas, interests, etc. These are very important because they are bridges for you to connect with other professionals, with recruiters, with companies, etc. So they are very important when it comes to finding a job.
And this is where LinkedIn has really kind of come into its own in the last few years as a platform for communications professionals to espouse the work of their clients or to position their CEOs and chairmen and so on. So what works well in terms of executive positioning? What should people who are in the industry be looking to do and share to get their spokespeople or thought leaders noticed?
It's very important to focus on quality, on insights that you will be giving about your industry or about the type of job that you do. Always also try and use the analytics that LinkedIn provides to see what kind of content is working, what kind of reactions are you having, who are you reaching, and whose interest are you provoking or are you poking, and who are you bringing in to the conversation. Now, also sharing, as I said, consistently is very important. It's never enough to share just once every 6 months, right? We have to keep up to date, to react to our industry's developments, to thoughts that inspire us. We also, very importantly, have to start conversations with other professionals. And this is done through many ways, through posts, through articles, through videos, of course. And we have to think about it through asking questions.
I think from a more zoomed out perspective, from a comms professional perspective, LinkedIn has really become the go-to platform for executive positioning over the last few years, just because I think in terms of social media, it's the most credible platform. It's where you find real people using their real names, how they write it on official documents. They have one profile. So for example, if I want to see what the Minister of Finance in France said about the protests last summer, I would go to read his blog on LinkedIn. There's no other place to go except for, fragmented pieces in media interviews. So LinkedIn has become the go-to place for executive positioning.
Najat, I wonder if we could come to you as someone with a journalistic background, Sky News, if I'm not mistaken, and went over to working for a government entity and now works in-house at LinkedIn. And I wonder how your use of the platform changed from the employer that you were working for.
Well, obviously, I think I use it in the best way possible now, just because I know the inner workings and I know what works and what doesn't work. When I was at Sky News, I wasn't using it very well. That changed when I went over to the World Government Summit, because I saw it as a social media platform where we can promote content. We built our page on LinkedIn. And through my transition to LinkedIn, I would say the number one thing that we should focus on when we think of company presence on LinkedIn is strategy. Lead with strategy. Create an effective, clear company page. And keep refining it as you go. Don't just throw the information on there and leave it be. If you have news, updates, throw them on there, because a lot of people look to that company page for information about the company or organization. Identify your goals, your audiences, decide what you want to accomplish, and based on that answer, build your strategy. And your road towards getting there. So are you looking for awareness? Are you looking for lead generation? All these paths can take you through different content strategies. A mistake I see a lot of people doing, especially in the social media world, is copying and pasting the same kind of content. For example, a video, just throwing it on their Instagram page, on the LinkedIn page. This doesn't really work, because as I said, if you identify your audiences, they are different audiences, specific to each platform. So you have to keep that in mind when you put content on the platform and cater to that audience. Most of all, be thoughtful about the content. Content is king, just like Lynn just highlighted, and it's what drives engagement. So share engaging content, fresh ideas that your target audience might be interested in. Put yourself in their shoes. What would you like to hear from that company?
So this is an interesting dynamic then, yourself and Lynn working together, because you would have been in a position where you were trying to get your company noticed, and Lynn would have been in a position where she was choosing what news stories were featured on the LinkedIn platform. So Lynn, I wonder if we can come to you then and ask, what stands out to you as a news editor on LinkedIn? What is it that makes your shortlist of trending stories of that day? Because please correct me if I'm wrong, but you are the one that decides which posts are featured each day depending on what's trending. So what do you look for there?
We're often asked, what do journalists do on LinkedIn and why? So the answer is we're a bunch of almost 75 journalists across the world. We work like a global newsroom, and our mission, our raison d'être, if you want to call it or put it this way, is basically to bring LinkedIn members the news and the views they need to talk about things that matter. So basically two things: the news and making people talk. The whole idea is to bring the conversations I was mentioning a bit before, because we are a platform that has basically the largest professional pool in the world. If we get all those people with all those different hats and different positions in their professional life to talk and to make sense out of the news out there, then that's it. We're basically the #1 media company in the world. So why the feature, and what does it mean, the feature? Being featured editorially, it means being picked or having a comment, an article, a video that is picked by the LinkedIn editorial team. And the LinkedIn editorial team has different products. They are free, we call them products. They are, for instance, the Daily Rundown, which is the top 5 news, or 6, depends on the region and on the time. Basically, the top news that you need to know every day. This is, the Daily Rundown is sent to all members. In the GCC countries, for instance, they receive it at 8 a.m. and they can find it in their notification tab.
How do you go about selecting what news is shared? How do you choose what news outlet, what media publication to give the platform of LinkedIn to? And how do you avoid bias in that selection process?
Well, when it comes to content first, what matters to us editorially is what matters to members, right? So for instance, when the COVID-19 happened, we know that this is obviously the focus of everybody, be it with first when the pandemic hit, obviously with the numbers, with what the authorities were doing, with what countries were launching in terms of measures, in terms of precaution, in terms of new rules, etc. So that's in terms of content. And in terms of sources, what we do is always source from known places or known sources. And those are the same that I spoke about a bit earlier: authorities, big news wires. And when those big news wires, for instance, bring a source or bring a scoop, we make sure to mention that it is X newswire that brought a scoop from their journalists, for us to be very clear in terms of where we are getting this information from and where we are, resourcing it to.
Najat, I wonder if I can bring you into the conversation here. Is this idea of facilitating conversational journalism from, with your communications manager hat on, Najat, how closely do you have to monitor some of these discussions to make sure that they are above board and in keeping with the modus operandi of LinkedIn?
We actually have a very clear division of responsibilities when it comes to content moderation. It's completely up to the editors. They are the professionals here. And the way they describe themselves is exactly what Lynn said. They are a newsroom of journalists within LinkedIn. So we make sure, despite of our personal relationships and friendships, that this is respected and well within bounds.
One last question on this topic, ladies. You're both from journalistic backgrounds. Lynn, you were at Al Arabiya, and Najat at Sky News. I wonder what you would say is the most valuable skill set that journalism inculcated in you that you think is going to be perennially relevant to any job that you go for?
I think I would say content, crafting content. I think no matter where I go and how I change my domain, as I said before, content is always king, and it is in huge demand and short supply, I think, in our region. I can't speak for other markets. I think something that I learned from journalism that I hugely appreciate now is concise writing. Journalists tend to shave down the writing. So usually when I get something from a comms professional, like a piece of content or a press release, if it's 10 paragraphs, I can take it down to 2 or 3. And I'm very proud of that.
Awesome. Lynn?
And for me, I think it would be the relevance. So understanding or having the reflex to think of why is this news relevant and to who and what does it mean, making sense out of it and putting in a context that is bigger than just the ABC.
Lynn, Najat, we've talked extensively there about the future workforce and the skills that we might need going forwards to be relevant in the future. One person who has hit this on the head and the company that is known for dealing with times of disruption and moving forward is Satya Nadella, the third CEO of Microsoft, who, talking to Amanpour and company, had this to say. Let's have a listen.
Is the value we ascribe to all type of work right? Or does it have to change? When you sort of realize that 20% of your GDP had to be spent in order to recover from the impact of this pandemic, I think we're all going to probably go back to the fundamentals and ask ourselves, what could we have done to have avoided this situation?
We're still here with Najat, Abdelhadi and Lynn Chouman of LinkedIn. Ladies, thank you for offering your thoughts and perspectives on the future of work and media in the digital era. We've got your professional thoughts, but now we would like to get to know you a little bit better. So I'm going to throw a few more personal questions your way to see what we can elicit from you. Up for that?
Yep.
Yes.
Full of confidence. That's what we like. Okay. First question. Najat, coming to you first. Lynn will come to you second. Okay. First question. Cats or dogs?
Cat.
Dogs.
Excellent. Earliest childhood memory. Najat, coming back to you.
Picking lemons from the lemon tree at my grandparents' house.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's so rich with imagery. Whereabouts was this house?
In Nablus, in my city.
Wonderful. Lynn, that's a tough one to follow, that.
Actually, it's very similar. I would say a very nice afternoon in the family's summer house in Lebanon, in Baalbek.
Beautiful. Your one hope for the future, Najat?
I hope that one day in my lifetime, we will have an airport in Palestine so that I can go for a weekend and not have to cross borders and waste a few days just getting there.
Wonderful. Lynn?
Efficiency. I believe efficiency in the world, more efficiency / productivity will bring the best out of this world and out of humanity. So that's what I would go for and hope for.
Books or music? Coming to you first, Lynn.
Both. It's a very tough question. Both, because it depends on the time. I'm always reading and I'm always listening to something. So I can't really pick.
I don't see myself living without either. Each one has its own time.
Okay. I'll allow that, even though that is very much fence sitting. Okay, Lynn, coming back to you. Your ideal Friday?
My ideal Friday starts early. It's an early day. I started with a run, then a workout, either like a swim, a yoga class, and then ideally I would see friends, family, big lunch. I like to connect with people I love over food. And then afternoon, very quiet, reading my book and listening to music, not picking between either.
Nice. Najat?
I would say starting slow with coffee and a good book under the sunshine if it's good weather. And then a big family lunch, some cooking. I usually make the dessert and maybe having some time just for me in the evening.
What did you want to be when you were growing up?
A detective.
that apple didn't fall far from the tree. What happened there?
Well, I mean, maybe it's never too late, right? I'm very curious, and I want to understand how things work and what's really happening. So that's what I've always wanted to do, still kind of do, like somewhere. Maybe it's never too late, I don't know.
My answer is boring, because I honestly always wanted to be a journalist.
That's not a boring answer. That's a wonderful answer, and it shows that you've achieved. If you could relive one moment of your life, what would it be, Najat?
It would be my wedding. Not because I am nostalgic or I want to relive it. I want to do a lot of things differently. So,
Okay.
If that's allowed in your question.
That's great. Let's just hope the husband isn't listening. We're keeping the same husband though, right?
Yeah, no, keeping the same person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And Lynn?
It would be a hike I had when I was a teenager with my grandfather. I would definitely do that again and listen to what he said and was saying throughout this hike with my eyes and heart and, mind today.
Wonderful stuff. Lynn, Najat, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us on Comms Life. It was lovely chatting to you.
Likewise.
Thank you so much, Thomas.
Thanks for listening to Comms Life. For more episodes, you can download the Comms Life podcast from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep up to date with everything from the Comms Life team by following our social media pages on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Stay safe and be well.